What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. I know that my title and my thoughts are going to trigger some people, but I don't care. You know, in politics, when you're discussing politics, honesty is not appreciated. I mean, we've grown very partisan in everything, sports, opinions in general. We look at everything as a team. We've used gang mentality or turned to a gang mentality with everything. You're a Trump supporter. Oh, why don't you just admit you're a Trump supporter? You must really have short-term memory, because I remember very vividly, less than a month ago, I got on here and told you I thought Kamala Harris won the debate. But some of you guys are so emotional. I get politics will elicit emotions, but some of y'all completely lose your logical thinking when it comes to this stuff, man. I told you I'm more of an observer. I'm like in the stands watching this. You guys might be out in the field being involved, and I understand partisan feelings and that, but I'm observing. So I don't really have a horse in this race. I told you I voted third party. I already voted in my home state. I didn't vote for either one of these clowns. Now, whoever you vote for, that's your prerogative, and that's your right. But anyway, I thought that J.D. Vance won the debate. I put a post up maybe about 25 minutes into the debate, maybe somewhere in there in that range, and I said, so far, J.D. Vance is cooking Tim Walz. Now, after I posted that, I thought that Tim Walz did better in the last 20 to 25 minutes of the debate. When it got to questions about healthcare, when it got to questions about January 6th, I thought that J.D. Vance fumbled a bit when it came to those topics. Toward the end, Tim Walz improved. Okay? So I will say it wasn't a blowout overall, but I thought J.D. Vance won the debate. Not just on style, but his style was more effective. He seemed more in command of the issues, and he was very forceful last night in making sure that that the answers that he gave were clear and concise. He was detailed in his answers. And remember when he overtalked the moderator to fact check the moderator? Remember one of the complaints about the other debate last month was that with Trump, it was essentially 3-on-1. Because that's how Trump supporters saw it, right? And some people who weren't Trump supporters thought that was the case. So J.D. Vance was very aggressive in making sure that in his arguments, at least in his mind, that what he was saying and what the moderators were saying to his base, that they were going to keep it fair and 100. Okay. So he won on style. He just seemed like the J.D. Vance that was nominated back in July for the VP nod. The J.D. Vance that was the only Trump-endorsed candidate to win back in 2022 in the midterm. That J.D. Vance seemed like a rising star. But ever since he was nominated for vice president, it's just been a fumble. He comes across as, I've done videos about this. He comes across as weird. He comes across as weirdly obsessed with children and women having children. And then, the photos that the mainstream media conveniently ignores of him dressed, you know what I'm saying, in a weirdo way. Let's put it like that, right? So I've been cooking him. Like, people don't watch the videos. They didn't really watch them. But with Diddy, people can't get enough of it. But JD Vance, I thought, won on style by a landslide. Substance, it was a slight edge to JD Vance overall. Earlier, big. But Tim Walz didn't do bad. He didn't do bad. Okay, he didn't do badly. He did better than Tim Kaine did back in 2016 when Mike Pence destroyed him in that debate. Incidentally, oftentimes the vice presidential debates, which often are seen as less influential than the presidential debate, they're not very decisive, most people would say, as far as the election. But a lot of times the vice presidential debates are better in substance because they actually debate policy. This debate, to me, far exceeds the first two, between Trump and Biden and Trump and Kamala. Far exceeds it when it comes to substance and the performance of both candidates. So yeah, look, Tim Walz did a lot better than Tim Kaine did 8 years ago when Mike Pence mopped the floor with him. Also, we didn't know much about Tim Walz. One thing that I knew about him was that he was the governor of Minnesota. But I didn't know much about him as far as his positions, who he was. So for him to come out there, early on you could hear some nervousness in his voice, but he quickly relaxed. And I thought that he did a very good job. He did a much better job than Kamala did of actually articulating the arguments for Kamala, defending the Biden-Kamala administration. And toward the end, he scored some major points, especially when it came to 9/11, because some of those answers J.D. Vance was waffling on. You know what I'm saying? Whether or not the Trump administration would admit that they would lose this election. Excuse me, whether or not they would accept defeat if they lost this election, whether or not Trump lost in 2020. These are yes or no answers. January 6th, healthcare, that question. A lot of stuff J.D. Vance was kind of waffling a little bit with those ones. That's why what went from being a landslide blowout for J.D. Vance narrowed toward the end. Okay, so Tim Walz made a good accounting for himself. But J.D. Vance, this was a major win for him because, like I said with Kamala, even if you thought Trump won on points in the debate last month, Kamala won because she exceeded expectations. Now, you can make an argument. You can say too, Raw, well, Tim Walz exceeded expectations. You can make that argument. But to me, I thought J.D. Vance won this debate because it was, when you look at all of the L's that the Trump campaign and J.D. Vance been taking since July, this was a much-needed boost. A much-needed boost for the Trump campaign and for J.D. Vance, who in the past had a reputation as being a good debater. And I expected him to perform well. I thought that he would at least probably come across with a tie or possibly win this debate against Walz. So he got that much needed boost. Although a lot of these Insta polls are going to probably say Tim Walz won or it was a tie. Because a lot of these Insta polls are, let's be honest, man. Most of these Insta polls are really biased. Like 8 years ago, when Mike Pence clearly blew out Tim Kaine a lot of those Insta polls said it was tied. So, I mean, I prefer the scientific polls done by pollsters. You know what I'm saying? Where there's no bias or very little bias involved. You know what I'm saying? Most of these people who answer these Insta poll things just historically tend to be left of center. A lot of these forums are left of center too. But yeah, I mean, this was a much better debate. We actually had policy discussed, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, man. But let's be honest too. At the end of the debate, at the end of the day, this isn't really going to move the needle much. This isn't going to move the needle much. But I thought that Tim Walz overall, after a few stumbles, did okay. It's not that he performed poorly. It's not. But I thought that JD Vance, when you look at how he had been performing overall, and the perception of JD Vance since he became the GOP VP nominee, I thought that this was a big recovery for him. You know, but hey, we can agree to disagree. Also, I want to say this too in closing. If the Trump-Vance campaign goes down to defeat, now suddenly GOP voters are probably looking at JD Vance as perhaps the future of the party. He's only 40 years old. So if Trump loses, well, hell, either way, if Trump loses or if Trump wins, JD Vance may be the nominee for the Republicans in 2028. Maybe. But we'll see. We'll see. So tell me what you guys think.
Core real.